Good evening. I'm calling the March 11th, 2024 Finance Building and Grounds Committee meeting to order. There's one change to our agenda today. Item 4.04, presentation of the 24-25 proposed athletics budget will be postponed and moved to the next working session in April. Okay, our first item of business is item 201, the approval of the meeting minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 20th? Yeah, from March 20th of 2023.
The last time you had a gavel.
Last time I had a gavel.
So moved.
And a second. Meetings approved, the minutes are approved. Can we approve those minutes at a regular working session? Or does it have to be a standalone committee meeting?
We were actually just talking about that. Since this committee meeting doesn't meet regularly and only as needed, we will take the minutes from this meeting and we'll put them under the Finance B&G section of the next working session.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 3.01. The capital financing plan discussion by Mr. Brad Remig of Public Financial Management.
Good evening. It's nice to come to a meeting and still have it be light out. How about that? So thank you very much again. My name's Brad Remig. I'm with PFM Financial Advisors. I brought the team along as well. Josh Martinez is here from my team and Garrett Moore as well. So I wanted to bring everybody here so they got a chance to meet the committee as well as, participate in the discussion should there be questions. So what we have put before the committee is we put together a financing plan based on the information that I think you heard last month from Dave Schrader as your architect. And so we kind of built off that. What the goal of the plan is to figure out, okay, if you're going to undergo capital projects, how might we pay for them? Okay, how are we going to finance them? How are we going to pay for these projects? And I'll get to that in a second, but there are different sources that we'll look at potentially using to pay for the projects. The chart that I wanted to put before the committee is, this is an interest rate chart because some of the funds will likely need to be borrowed for the capital program. And when we borrow funds for a capital program, quite often we sell municipal bonds. Tax exempt municipal bonds is very common to be utilized. And when we do that, we enter the, like I said, tax exempt market. And this is the chart that you'll be familiar seeing from me, just to give you an idea where the market is. Because the municipal bond market is different than the treasury market and different from the stock market. So this is the world I live in every day, the last 25 years of my life. In any event, so one thing that I think is interesting here is that I think folks are aware of the fact that the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates recently. But if you look at history, and our top chart's perfect to show, it's basically what we call a yield curve. It plots different interest rates at different times. And if you look at the red line, that's the historic averages over the last 30 years, and the blue is where we are today. So although we've seen rates rise really since the pandemic, market is still quite attractive right now. And actually about 2/3 of the time, rates have been higher than they are today. So it's a good point to just set and let you know that the municipal bond market still is functioning well. As we start putting together the plan, if we could go to the next page, we kind of like to start with some bullet points and review some things, some terms that I might use. Basically, on the top, project overview, what we understand, you're in the preliminary stages of the potential capital projects, which are listed above: some road work, some parking, middle school, high school, district administration building, and athletic fields. That's what we understand the case is going on right now. We talked with the Schrader group and we asked them for an idea, and thanks to Jackie and her team, they're very helpful here as well. is if, kind of how would these projects progress, or just give us an estimate of how this might go so we can get an idea of what your funding sources or what your needs are to be able to pay for the projects. Sub bullet C, you'll notice that right now we needed to pick a number for about what kind of funds might be available from your available reserves. We know this is a moving number, it's a moving target, but we wanted, in order to put together a plan, have an idea of what reserves might be available to be used as putting together part of the financing plan. So that's kind of the start. Under number 2, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that if you borrow funds for this, you're able to borrow funds on a tax exempt basis. And what that means is if people buy your bonds, they don't have to pay tax on them, at least those people that, for federal tax purposes. And that's a good thing for you, because if they don't pay tax on it, they'll accept a lower interest rate. So we want to pay a low interest rate. Okay, so that's one of the things that we have the advantage of doing. But there are some rules that go around it. Okay, and under A, B, and C, I think the biggest takeaway on this one is that if you borrow money on a tax exempt basis, you must reasonably need to think you're going to spend it within 3 years. So if in 20-something it's going to occur in 2030, we can't borrow today for it. You have to kind of expect to spend it within 3 years, and then you're going to proceed with diligence with the projects. Okay, so that's kind of one rule. Number 3, arbitrage rebate considerations. One of the things that because we're borrowing on a tax exempt basis, one of the things when you get the money in from the bond market, you're going to be able to invest. And when we invest it, we have to be careful about how that's done, because we can't just borrow it on a lower rate and reinvest at a higher rate and keep it, because there's certain rules that go along the way. So there'll be some, but there are some exceptions to these things that we'll have to factor into the plan as we move forward. For example, if you borrow 15 million or less in a calendar, you're a small issuer, so you can keep all the money for a 3-year period. So it's some of the things that we'll have to factor into, because as we put the borrowing plan together, and different spending exceptions, things of that nature will factor into how we execute. The one other thing what you might hear me say is if you can get bonds that are bank qualified, under the rules, there are some advantages to that, such as paying a little bit lower rate, a little better prepayment provisions. The district has used that strategy when it was applicable in the past, but I'm just kind of putting some things out there for you as we go through the planning stages. So if we go to the next page, I'll get into the numbers now. This is where I'm most comfortable, is with numbers. And we kind of thought we'd start with where is the school district today? Okay, what existing debt do you have right now, and how might we put together a plan that factors that in? Well, if you look at this chart on the top, it says debt service requirements. Those are the principal and interest payments due on your existing debt. And it might look a little wonky, different years, bonds get paid off at different years. Some of the payments vary by fiscal year. You might say this looks a little different, but at the end of the day, when you add up columns 2 through 8 to get to column 9, you'll notice that your annual debt payments are pretty level for the next 10 or 15 years. And then there's some drop-offs. Okay, so that's kind of where we're starting right now. If we scroll a little bit up, if you go to the bottom, you'll notice the numbers are a little bit lower. And why are they lower? The reason they're lower is that this nets out some of the PlanCon dollars that you were successful in claiming. Now we're in moratorium now, we understand that. But there is some PlanCon dollars coming back to the district to help make those principal and interest payments. So at the end of the day, I like to think of your net debt in column 18, after you make your payments and then you get some dollars from the state, we're just under $8 million a year in terms of your net debt payment in the budget. So that's where we are as we move into this. I thought I could pause here and see if anybody has a
Quick question. Can you explain for the public what a PlanCon dollar is?
Sure. So based on the scope of a project, what the dollars are used for, there was a process, and again, we're in moratorium right now, where the district could have certain hearings, file different forms, and see if there was any of the project that qualified for this state program or state plan con process. And in the past, when the plan con process was not in moratorium but active, the district did those things so they could qualify for those dollars. I don't foresee that happening on this one, but because of the moratorium that it's on. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
There's some other statistics at the bottom. I won't go through all those, but we kind of keep track of this with Jackie and, when bonds can be refinanced and things of that nature. You'll notice a couple of the bonds that you have are past the call date, which means, you can do it anytime thereafter. But right now, the interest rates on those bonds are lower than the market today, which is why we haven't approached the district to say, hey, let's refinance. Well, there's really no economic benefit to doing so. And if that changes, we'll certainly let you know. All right, so the next couple pages, the numbers are going to get small here, but basically what we were trying to figure out is if you look, there's column numbers across the top. And column 1 is month 1. I don't know what month 1's going to be. You're just kind of getting into all this. But when we talked to the architect, he said, well, whatever month 1 is, this is how I see the 5 phases of project, the dollars being spent. Okay, so columns 1 through 13 are really your expenditure of funds on the capital projects. Okay, rough draft put together from the architect, but very helpful for us in order to put something before the committee. Where Josh, Garrett, and I got involved was we were more on columns 14 through 18 to the right. We said, okay, if we're going to spend it as it looks like on the left, how are we going to fund it on the right? And there's 3 main funding sources that we foresee. First is what I mentioned before in column 14, bond proceeds. That's doing a municipal bond, borrowing the money so you have it to pay for the project cost. Number 2 is the cash that I mentioned earlier. You'll notice in 15, you'll maybe say, Brad, I heard you say 15 million earlier. This number is a little bit lower, and I'll get to that in just a moment because there might be some different ways we want to think about how we use the cash towards the project. And I'll get to that in just a second. And then the third column 16, is interest earnings. As I mentioned, when you borrow the funds on a bond issue, you're going to reinvest them, and you're going to be able to use some of those interest earnings to offset how much you need to borrow. So those are the main funding sources. The way we wanted to lay this out is for whenever month 1 is, if you'll notice over to the left, there's a lot of soft costs or planning costs associated with the projects. So we thought if we had that money to be able to pay for some of those preliminary costs, we could do that, and then we could start borrowing, okay, when the projects are bid and you're going to be spending the money on what I call the construction costs or hard costs. One of the things that you'll notice too is we're doing this and we're planning to do it in multiple phases. That'll be able to help us phase the debt payments. It'll make sure that we get the money we need to meet cash flow, but not borrow it before we need it. Okay, so that's the plan. So what we tried to do on this is figure out, okay, we have the cash, we have the interest earnings. In column 14, let's see what a bond issue for $15 million, and in this case, month 16, we put it. Okay, so it's well after really kind of the planning because the cash we can use to fund some of the upfront costs. So in month 16, we're estimating you do a first 15 million bond issue. Okay, that would take advantage of that small issuer thing that I mentioned earlier. Not a big deal, but nonetheless, I just wanted to show you that. Then if we scroll down in column 14, we borrow another 30 million in month 26. Okay, this is going to move around a lot, just so you know. It may not be month 26, it might be 24, it might be 28. We'll see. But we wanted to put something together for you to kind of see what a plan, how this kind of comes to pass. And then the last bond issue we have in month 36, so this is still a way off from whatever month 1 is, and that fully funds the project based on these cash flows. Again, these numbers are going to change, okay? But they're just something when the timing is going to change, but it was something to kind of model up for you. How we're going to fund the projects and when you might need to borrow money. If you look at the far right column at the very bottom, you'll notice after all this is done, in this illustration, we've borrowed just what we've needed, right? Because that ending balance goes to close to 0. So that's kind of what we call a construction draw schedule and figuring out, matching up what the architect says the estimated repayment, payment of the project cost would be, and when we need to get the funding sources to pay for the costs. All right, so then if you say, okay, Brad, that we see that you think we need a $15 million bond, a 30, a 27. How might this look if I did a bond issue? What are the payments, estimated payments on a bonds of these size? Okay, so what we did on the next page is we said, okay, remember we started off with where we are today. How much debt do we have? What are our debt payments? That's column 6. That's what we have. Column 7 is an estimated repayment schedule for $15 million bond. And you might say to yourself, I noticed that the payments are a little bit less up front and then they get a little bit bigger towards the back. And the reason for that is we are trying to minimize the budget impact up front and have the other payments get a little bit bigger as your other debts are paid off. It's what we call a wraparound, and it's a very common structure that we see for these types of capital projects. If it's unlike a mortgage where your mortgage is the same payment every month, it's not like that. This is a little bit different. It's a technique to kind of make sure we can make these payments fit within the budget. In the blue, there's the $30 million bond. What the payments might look like there. Again, you'll notice out in like the 2037, 2038 years, the payments in column 9 get a little bit bigger. What we're ultimately trying to do is keep an eye on column 10 and make sure that, we don't have balloons or big bubbles in your payments. Okay, and then so the yellow is the third bond issue that I mentioned, okay, up to the right of the yellow. So when it's all said and done, between the use of the cash towards the project and these 3 bond estimated payments, we wound up in column 12 in the yellow. That's kind of, you go from your old column 6 to now you're in column 12 after this is all said and done, okay? Then we worked with Jackie and her team to figure out, okay, how are we gonna phase this into the budget? And the thought in column 15, starting with next year's budget, there's going to be in the budget about $500,000 more a year, such that your column 6, remember before I said it was like 8 million, now the budget's going to fund 11 million of debt. Okay, so we kind of step our way into that. There are some years that you'll notice in column 12 that go above the 11, and if you remember what I mentioned before, maybe those are some ways to use your cash to help make those payments when they're a little bit over what the budget is. So there's the balancing act of 10 or $11 million towards the projects and about $4 million to help you make debt payments until your debt payments start to drop down again. A lot going on here. I'm sure we'll see this several other times, but that's kind of the thought of how the plan might play out. And and how you use the cash probably will change over time, how you decide to do it. But I wanted to illustrate, we want to illustrate for you, maybe, different way to use the cash. So that's that. The next slide, what we tried to do there.
Quick question.
Sure.
Pull back there a little bit. How do we get from, let's say like in 6/30/2025, we have the existing local effort of 8 million, and then we're up to 1.4 million. Where's that 1.4 million come from? And is the difference between column 15 and column 6?
I can answer that question.
Okay.
So at the end of tonight, we'll see a budget presentation for the general fund. And so what we're doing is we're adding over the next couple of years, the funding transferring from general fund to debt service fund to step into the debt.
Okay.
So that we're not having a big, huge tax impact or a bump to our budget. So that's what we're when you see budget and local effort, that is the difference. And you will see it, definitely we'll go over each of these business services slide. And then I'll point it out again when we go over the overall district.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question too?
Sure.
And so
Sure.
this is not my world, so bear with me. When we're talking about that 3-year where we have to spend it 85% of it within 3 years, and I'm looking at the slide, I think two before, and looking at these numbers, when we go to borrow that 15,000, And then we go to borrow the third, or sorry, the bond, huh? No, 50 million, million, big difference. Sorry, the 15 million, and then we go to borrow the 30 million. That, like, to me, that looks like that gives us, what, a year and a half, 2 years or whatever in between those. If we don't spend that 85% within those 3 years, what happens?
So what then would happen after 3 years is then when you reinvest, if you plan to continue forward, you don't have to give the money back. You don't have to pay a fine, nothing like that. But what happens is if you have any of those dollars left over, you can only invest them at the rate that you borrowed them at.
Okay.
And keep it. So that's kind of something you have to monitor. I think based on what we see the draws here, I don't think this 3-year thing is going to be a problem for you.
Okay.
I think because one of the things we were talking to Jackie about was we borrow it when we need it. We're borrowing when we need it. We know we're going to spend it. And we also show this as when the construction bids are in. So you wouldn't borrow it until you knew you got the bids and you didn't know if you were going to proceed with it. And you're going to proceed with the project. That was the thought there.
All right, thank you.
Again, preliminary, the difference between the second slide in the yellow and the slide just before is when your debt gets paid off, ultimately after you do the financing. It really relates to the final payoff. One of the advantage of the slide just before it, if you don't mind me going back real quick, is that you'll notice out in 2036, 2037, your debt payment drops down to about $7.5 million. Some people might say to themselves, okay, that leaves me some room if I have another project in 10 or 12 years from now that I've got funded in the debt service budget. But if you're going to do that, your bond term goes longer. If we go to the next slide, and this is not a decision that needs to be made today by any stretch, but we just want to illustrate a slide. Well, what happens if I pay it off more quickly? I can do that. You can pay it off more quickly. But what happens in that 2037 time is we don't have that drop off in debt payment. It's a more modest drop off to go from 11 million to 10 million. There's still a drop, but it's just something you like to think about whether you want to pay it off more quickly, but then you don't have the benefit of the drop, or do you want to preserve some drop in the future, more significant one. So I know I talked a lot. But we wanted to let you know that we thought about this and we have a plan and some thoughts about how you could kind of tackle this objective. And it does seem like it's doable.
Jumping into a long-term plan of this magnitude, have you guys, war games this a little bit in the fact, like, what if there's another COVID in 2030 or something like that? That could really put a wrench. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's a reality, so.
I think what we tried for the financing plan put together for you is we would be borrowing money once we thought we needed it, said we need it. And once you have good hard numbers, because I know this is still early, right? But we wanted to get with the committee, and Jackie wanted to make sure you thought that we're thinking this through, not only from just a project perspective and tackling your needs there, but also how are we going to pay for this? And we spent a significant amount of time, and thanks to Jackie and Beth, really they've been very helpful, and your architect was very helpful in getting information so we could put something together.
You go back to page or slide 5, I guess. A little higher. Yep. So, we're going to vote on these various phases at various times, right? How comes all the phases start these soft costs on month 1?
Do you mind if I
Go
just
for
jump in? Because we worked with David Schrader on this. So in this scenario, the design is pretty much upfront. That's why you see the soft costs, because projects are interconnected. But Dave and I had a conversation earlier today about, hey, let's have a conference call next week and speak with David Schrader, the architect, and a group of people internally to see what does it make sense to maybe just do the civil engineering, which is all of the earth movement up front first, because that's really what's all connected everywhere. And then maybe we talk to the architect about maybe timing it a little bit differently for maybe phase 1 And phase two, maybe we bid together, or however it might be, like to really dive a little deeper into that. So this is a scenario just to make sure we can have I want to call it a footprint, just like we did with the master facilities plan. It's not going to be exact, but it's in order to determine if it's affordable for us. And does it make sense with our tax impact and our rates and our budget from where we are? So our next steps for this, other than having the board acknowledge receipt of it, that you did receive like a footprint for a financing plan, would be for us to get together internally with our professionals and kind of dive a little deeper and then make some recommendations, come back to you in April about what we think our next steps are, what our next recommendation is as far as our next steps. That makes sense.
Any other questions from the committee? Are there any questions from the full board?
I have a couple questions.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So you spoke about the bond being tax exempt, federal and state?
For state, it's for Pennsylvania residents. But if someone in New York bought your bonds, they don't get the state
They don't
tax
get
benefit.
that. Okay, but if
the
you're in
federal-
Pennsylvania, it's federal and state tax exempt, and that's what makes it so attractive.
Yeah, and you have a good credit rating. So these people that buy these bonds have different choices to make every day. What do they want to buy, an Owen J. Roberts School District bond? They want to buy another corporate bond. And if the corporate bond has a rate of 5 on it, and they have to pay tax, maybe it's they're a bit more, leaning towards Owen J. Roberts, very solid school district, good credit rating, and they'll accept the 4%. And that's a good thing for us.
So when we look at the charts to buy bonds, municipal bonds, whatever, there's a rating like AAA, AA.
Mhm.
So this district would also get such a rating?
It has, I think we're AA1. Yeah, which is AAA is top.
Right.
AA1's just a little behind.
Okay.
Not a lot of AA1s in this common.
Thank you. And interest rates have been high, like really high, over 5% even people are making right now. So how would that impact? So when we offered a bond, how would the interest rate be determined?
The market is market determined. We factor in credit rating. That's part of my job as an advisor too, as I represent the district. I know the market, I know where it should be, and I make sure that I certify that you got a fair market rate.
So when you're predicting, a lot of it's predicting, we all had that globe, right? If it looks like they're bottoming out or they're going up, would that change any of this?
It could. I mean, if rates, COVID example, they were really, really low,
Right.
you might say, you know what, we're going to do phase 3 and 4. Maybe that 30 million should be 40. So that's what this is constantly going to change over the next several years, depending on where the board wants to go with all these different things. But yeah, you might accelerate your funding if rates are really low. The one thing I do want to repeat is that at the beginning I mentioned, even though rates have gone up a little bit, we're still below historic averages. And I think most people don't really realize that because they only hear about what the Federal Reserve is doing and Jerome Powell. I think folks think that the Federal Reserve is going to reduce interest rates during the course of the year. The market gets ahead of that, right? Okay, they think, they factor these things in. So right now, and the other thing, quite frankly, municipal bonds are very attractive. The supply is down a little bit. So relative to taxables, the tax exempt market is very attractive now. And we'll factor all that in as we go.
That brings up another question that I had. There's like the bonds would be sold 100%, right? Like there's not a risk that people wouldn't buy it.
Right.
Like we're not going door to door
No,
selling bonds, right?
There's a big market for Owen J. Roberts School District bonds. Yeah,
Okay.
they would be the way it would work is once an interest rate was settled upon, then the risk would transfer to the banker or the underwriter. You get your money.
Just to piggyback on that a little bit, we've never had an issue with our bonds underselling. They've never undersold in the time that I've been here or my predecessor. So,
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm looking for a motion from the committee to move this on to the board for acknowledgement, not approval, just acknowledgement.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 4.01. We have, well, agenda item 4 is the proposed operational cost center budget. So we have 4 of those tonight. Our first one will be the presentation of the 24-25 proposed facilities budget by Mr. Shelgren.
Good evening, everybody. Mike Shelgren, OTR Director of Facilities. So I'm going to be going over the proposed 24-25 facilities budget. So starting off, the first category is plant services. There's not many lines in this whole budget, so I'll just quickly touch on each line. And if you have any questions as I go, just please stop me, or I can also at the end. Professional services, first line, that's when we hire architects, engineers, that kind of thing for any kind of issues we may be having, any kind of design changes we need, stuff like that. Travels, that's for conferences, trainings. General supplies, what you'll see there is there's no budget change, but we split it. 23-24 general supplies carried HVAC filters and employee uniforms. So now I'm just basically splitting that and showing them a separate line. So you have employee uniforms and the others filters for HVAC units. Software and license fees. There's a slight increase of 3,000, and the majority of that is we incorporated a athletics module into our facility software. That's for all the facilities or the sports scheduling and practices and games and all that kind of stuff. So it's all incorporated into our schedule now. So now they can reserving fields, gyms, all that kind of stuff. Books, that's for our training manuals for our housekeeping folks. Replace capital equipment, that is majority of that is for housekeeping equipment. So as you can imagine, vacuum cleaners, floor scrubbers, that kind of stuff. Meals and refreshments, we just bumped that up slightly to reflect the actual costs. That's for we provide meals and refreshments for our monthly meetings for our housekeeping folks, our maintenance folks. We meet on a regular basis. Then dues and fees, that's just for our regular ongoing like permits for like wells, kitchen permits, any kind of stuff like that. So any questions on the plant services section? All right, moving on to building services. So disposal services, that is our trash and our recycling. There was a jump up in that. And what we traditionally do is we go through the CCIU to do cooperative purchasing with the CCIU. So all the schools in Chester County, we go in together as a bid, and we try to get the best price that way. What we found was the numbers were coming back huge. So we went out on our own and actually found another company that did not participate in a bid that was slightly lower. So that's what we went with. So even though it's an increase, it was we shopped it around for the best possible price we could find.
And I want to just make one comment. I think trash hauling services everywhere are challenging right now. It's very difficult. So the individual schools found that it was much better to try to find your own local provider. There was no single provider. I just want to make sure you know at the IU that could have taken on all of our counties services.
Yeah, and
So that's why
a little bit of backstory to that too is like I think a lot of them are getting bought up by these big national companies, and it's just they're taking advantage of it. So electricity and natural gas are kind of tied together, and what you'll see is a decrease in electricity, but an increase in natural gas budget, and they nearly balance out. There's a $5,000 increase overall for the year. The way we get to that is we use Provident Energy. They're our energy broker. They've been with us for a long time. And what they do is they make predictions on how much energy we'll use for the year. And then, they give us budget numbers to put in our budget. And they were also, involved with our Giza project where we, you know, the majority of it was like we went through and put new LED lighting everywhere, HVAC upgrades and all that kind of stuff. So, as part of the Giza project, and for those of you who don't know, Giza stands for Guaranteed Energy Savings Act. So we did this big project for energy savings throughout the district. We were expected to save about $62,000 this year. So that $62,000 savings went into this calculation. So it basically kept our rates flat for electricity and natural gas. If we didn't do that Giza project, we would see that increase this year. Water and sewage, that's just public water and public sewage. So that went up $6,000 over multiple buildings for the whole year. Maintenance, that's basically anything that we cannot do in-house. So, you know, we have bigger things like, you know, boiler work, chiller work, big pipe leaks, stuff like that. That's what that line item's used for. Extermination services, you know, exterminator. Bottled gas, that is propane. So our Warwick building is on propane fuel for heat. So that's stayed flat for this year. And then oil, that's heating fuel oil. So we kept that the same as well. So any questions on that category?
Just a little bit confused on the natural gas. So the natural gas is through the supplier. We're not actually using more natural gas at our facility.
That's the number we get from Provident Energy. So that's what they're telling us that however they calculate it is what they expect we will spend this year on natural, you know what I mean?
Do we have equipment that uses that has experienced a difference in how we use natural gas between last year and this year?
We've made some changes to the chillers, like we had some that were natural gas, some that are not. There's probably, as part of that increase, it's probably an increase in the natural gas price for the year. I don't have that breakdown in front of me, and I can provide that afterwards if you want.
I guess that you've gotten to the meat
Yeah.
of my question. I'm just curious whether our usage has changed or if it is
No.
only the price.
No, I don't think the usage has changed much. I think it's more based on the market. Is where they're getting that number from.
It's showing a 50% increase, right?
Correct. Yeah. And like I said, I can provide you that backup information from Provident, how they came up with that calculation, but what we do is we basically put their number in here, and historically their number's been pretty accurate.
Is there a,
Have you picked me up? We were on a long-term natural gas contract through Provident Engineering, through Constellation. So we had the benefit of having significantly lower gas prices for the last 5 years. That contract expires and we are going out to bid for natural gas. And the prices of natural gas now compared to in the past, significantly different. They will do the very best they can because we actually are in a consortium with Provident Energy across the state of Pennsylvania. That is really, that's the nuts and bolts of the gas.
that led to my next question. Is there a consortium either on the county or state level that we're a part of?
Yep, it's actually state level. I would call it state. I would say there are probably close to 200 of the 511 or so schools that participate in with Provident Energy and their consortium. So they've done really well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, ground services. So there's no changes there from last year to this year. So, you know, so we got snow removal. That's like hitting a moving target every year. We've been very, very lucky. Last couple of years, we haven't spent the, you know, what we have budgeted, which is great. But we have had years in the past where we've gone beyond that. So this year's another good year. Lawn care services, that's basically mowing. And then repair and maintenance, that's everything outside of mowing. That's tree work, cleaning swales, any kind of landscaping you can think of besides like mowing. So And then the last category, and there's no changes in this as well, is plant services. So that's basically our internal supplies for carpentry, electrical, HVAC, painting, plumbing, and then janitorial supplies, which would be, paper towels, toilet paper, soap, or any kind of, cleaning products, that kind of stuff. So, and then, there's staff development, which stayed the same as well. So, all that being said, the budget difference between last year and this year is 51,000, which equals, an increase of 1.62%. Any questions?
I think it might be helpful to see some, budget versus actual numbers, in this as well. Either, I guess it would have to be prorated since we're not through the year yet.
Okay, we can certainly provide that.
I can actually provide you, we maintain a by cost center, which is how we're presenting to you. Every month, we're updating what the projected actual numbers are. So I'm happy to share that.
I know we get it monthly, but,
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant, I keep it cumulative on a separate sheet just to refer to, and I can actually send.
Okay.
Not part of the budget.
All right, thank you.
any other questions from the committee? Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, moving on to item 4.02, presentation of the 24-25 proposed business services budget by Ms. Polinsky.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so business services budget for 24-25. Before we get started, I just want to kind of give you an overview of what's in here because this budget is really kind of like the kitchen sink. It kind of collects all of the various costs, not only the supplies and professional services for the district's fiscal operations, but it also includes general liability and property insurance, the senior tax relief program, capital projects and debt service transfers, and the budgetary reserve. Next slide. So I'm going to go over basically the differences, the column all the way to the right. The first one will be the tax collection services. There's an increase of almost $30,000 there. And that is due to two things. The collections that we have been experiencing have been increasing. And so this is the additional cost in order for us to recognize those additional revenues. Plus, there are some costs that are in this line item as well for the appraisal services that we are using for our assessments. The next line item, business services, the $5,500 increase there is attributable to our software. You might remember last year's presentation, we were talking with all of the cost center managers about the increases for software, and it was kind of like a 5% across the board that we've been experiencing. We were lucky enough in business services not to experience that last year. However, our renewal is this fall, and we don't know. Our best guess is we might have that 5% increase. So that's what that $5,500 represents. The next increase for $51,706 is for our district's insurance. That includes our general liability and property insurance in the district. We meet annually twice a year with our representatives for our insurance policies. This was our first look, is that this increase is going to be the $51,700, and that is reflective of the insurance market. I don't know that we have any other recourse there. It's just how the market is for insurance at the time.
Is that based on like a safety rating or anything like that, or past performance?
Past performance probably has a little bit to do with calculation, but it's just generally insurance costs are going up as claims are rising, pretty much across the country. And this is the market that we're left with.
Have we had, an increase in claims?
We've had a few claims in the last couple of years, but I mean, would you agree, Jackie? I don't think they were anything that would raise our rate.
I don't think they're outrageous compared to other schools, but I'm happy to provide you. We track that. I can send you a list or provide a list so you can see that.
Yeah, sure. And, make sure that we have proper controls and to kind of minimize future claims.
Mm-hmm. Sure. The next change is, a decrease of $150 for staff development. We have been able to take the opportunity to engage in professional development that is online. So that tends to be cheaper than traveling to conferences and so we've been able to keep those costs down. The next difference there is the $1,000 decrease in the senior tax relief program. And that is just based on participation. We seem to notice a decline in the in-person volunteer portion of that program, and we are seeing an increase in the rebate portion. Okay, so then the next section brings us down to the capital projects fund transfer. That is increasing by $14,756. The amount that we will be moving to capital this year is $2,436,032. And that is board policy to move over 1 mil each year, each budget year. The next line item, this is where the big impact is, $1,235,465 increase for the debt service fund transfer. And this is directly attributable to the presentation that you saw when we opened the meeting tonight. And then the very last line item, budgetary reserve, is increasing by $64,000 this year. And again, that is also board policy to set aside 1% of next year's budgeted expenditures. That makes our total increase $1,400,000. Are there any questions?
So that assumes that we are going to approve to move forward with the capital.
Right,
plan.
not necessarily as presented tonight. That was just an idea.
Right.
But yes, that we would need financing in order to complete that project.
Okay, thank you.
Use the phase.
And this is just a recap of everything I just said.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Any other questions from the board?
Hi.
So about the staff development.
Mhm.
So we do a lot of online, which is great.
Yes.
Do we use the in-house? Like a lot of the staff here are
Mhm.
very talented in different areas. Do we ever
Mhm.
use the staff to do the development?
Well, mainly what this is financial development. So anything that is coming up in our area. So it might be with PASBO, it might be that, they're always outside.
It's just business.
Yeah, it's just for business. Yeah.
Dr. Soder has all of.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
This would be a bargain if the teachers were included in this. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to item 14.03, presentation of the 24-25 proposed transportation budget by Mr. Gray.
Fun stuff. Right. So thank you for having me tonight. Chris Gray, I'm the Director of Transportation. I know I see a lot of familiar faces. So you've heard the transportation portion before. Some of you maybe have not. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on the transportation department as a whole, just so you can maybe grasp the extent of what we're responsible for. So we are responsible for transporting resident students within the 100 square miles of our district to our 7 public schools. What a lot of people don't realize is that we're responsible for transporting to non-public charter schools 10 miles beyond the district boundary, so quite large. Here's the section I want to call transportation fun facts, because I looked these up this morning. And it might be staggering for some. We transport 6,150 school-age students to schools throughout the district and beyond using 94 school buses. We transport 327 non-public school students to 31 non-public schools, 68 charter school students to 2 charter schools. We do 53 special needs and early intervention students to 22 different programs and placements. We transport 165 tech school students every day to and from our Pickering campus and the PM. In addition, we transport to work programs and homeless students as well. So it's quite the operation.
Can we get those numbers sent to us?
Sure, absolutely. So that is as of this morning. So I looked it up because I'm curious, and we keep an eye on this and we track this daily. So students come in, come out, people request transportation, people deny transportation. So it's a living, breathing animal. I want to say beast all on its own. So any day these numbers could change by a significant amount of students, depending on whether or not parents choose to use transportation or not. So now we'll get into the meat of my budget. And I'm going to start with the disclaimer, not the disclaimer, but I just want to make you aware that I did adjust the final budget numbers in the 23-24 to reflect the contract addendum that we did last year to increase driver wages for retention. So basically, drivers got an increase in their daily rate, in their daily wage. And we were able to bump up our starting rate for a new CDL driver to $25 an hour, which is pretty substantial and has paid off tenfold, in my opinion. So that number there for contracted carriers does reflect that. So it did increase our daily rate last year from $300.56 to $321.50. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that that number has been adjusted. And with that being said, pretty substantial jump from the 5.4 million to the 6 million. And that's primarily due to the addition of new buses to account for the bell time change that's coming next year. I'm only going to hit the ones that look like the ones that change significantly in the line items. Rarely do we get a win, but we got one with fuel. So we are in the county co-op or consortium. And although we're ordering more fuel next year, we're actually coming out ahead. So maybe $7,000 savings in diesel and a $4,000 savings in gasoline. So yeah, I'll take it whenever we can get it because although we're ordering more fuel, we're paying less than we are in the current year. General supplies, that jumps up pretty substantially, and that is due to the fact that we purchase our own radios. So there are radio purchases in there for the new school buses that we'll need for the upcoming school year. Midday is the standard 3.5%. That's due per our contract. So I don't anticipate, that's early intervention. That's the midday transportation that we provide. I anticipate 5 buses again for the upcoming school year, and that increase is due to the contracted 3.5% increase that we're due. Gasoline, I mentioned that we're coming out ahead. Educational software and licensing fees. We did, for the first time ever, get an increase in our bus contact software. They were very good for a long time. So that's jumped. It's been $1,000.50, or that $1,050. It's jumped up to almost $1,200. And then we were outdated in our fuel management system, so we had to switch from GasBoy to Ecos, which includes cellular data. So that's gone from $845 to $1,968, but that also includes the data charges. And that's the pumps, the gasoline and the diesel pumps at the bus lot that we utilize. So you can go to the next, thank you. This is always difficult, especially the non-public, because I never really know until August who's going to ride our buses. So we do require that non-public school parents request transportation. They do that in the form of an Act 372 form. So they submit those throughout the summer. They've been down, so I anticipate a slight increase, but they've been down since COVID. But I see more and more coming back. So I do anticipate having more non-public school students. I'm going to throw this in there because I'm looking towards the future. I anticipate that when we move to a full day kindergarten, that charter school number is going to decrease substantially. A lot of those families choose those schools because they do provide full day kindergarten. I think we'll get those back. For private schools, they're the placements, special ed programming, this sort of things. I think that stays pretty much the same with a slight increase for the most part. Early intervention, that is hit or miss. So they come from the county. They're IU students. We've been on the low side recently. I don't anticipate that changing. Could be wrong, but that's the 5 midday buses that we have in the budget. to transport their students at midday. We do an AM and a PM session. We do those in East Coventry. We do those at West Vincent. We do those at PCH Pickering, Schuylkill Elementary, wherever they have an early intervention class with the students that fit those programming needs. Cat Pickerings, increasing over the years quite substantially. I think I just said we have 165 this morning, as of this morning, that are in the PM session, handful of full day students. Anticipate we'll see more of those in the near future. For a total of, what did I say, 6,280 students I'm looking forward to next year. And again, we'll do 101 buses next year, which is the addition of the 7 to account for the overlap in the PM for the non-public schools that we transport to. I think, is there another slide or is that? There's our win. If you can see, the 23-24 price per diesel per gallon is $286.54. We got it for the upcoming school year at $262.06, and then gasoline again is down from $242.22 to $228.67. So I did not anticipate when I did this originally. I think I put $3.50 in for, yeah. So it was a huge adjustment to my initial budget. So take it when I can get it. I think is that probably it? I think that was probably pretty quick, but does anyone have any questions?
Might be slightly off topic, but this program that we implemented with the cameras on the buses, is that providing any income? And is that your department or does that go somewhere else?
It is. It's through myself and security. We do get monthly reports, but that was on a stay because there was an issue with the way citations were being issued. So we didn't get anything. Well, we can go back retro, and I haven't seen those numbers yet, but we have had. I don't think we're making anything on it, but it's staggering the number of drivers that drive through these lights. And I can forward those reports along. I think
Sure.
we didn't get one. We got one.
One.
We got one for
We received
November.
One.
But there was legislative issues and how the processing of those citations were issued had to be reevaluated, and then they went through and
I can provide a little bit of clarity on that.
because I can't remember how long it was, the
Sure.
end of
It
October
was
through
the state
November.
police. I don't know if you remember before the state police were not issuing citations. So we just, John Yap just let us know that in any state police area, which is French Creek and South Coventry for us, he will actually have to process those. So there will be a slight change in that. But all of the other townships, they are processing the citations. Just stopped doing the reporting on that, so they ironed all of that out. It's ironed out.
Right, it had a lot to do with the state police, but it
Mhm.
also had to do with how they were being issued and the appeal process. The appeal process
Mhm.
basically is where it all boiled down to, and now they have everything in line, and they've started to reissue tickets, I believe, right somewhere around February 15th, middle of February, they started to reissue those citations and forward those to local jurisdictions.
Yeah, so this was the first full year of that program,
This
right?
is
I
the
believe?
first full year. This is
Yeah.
the first full year of the bus.
So yeah, it'd be interesting to see like if those citations are going down as this program is in process. And
I'm
then,
sure it's raised a lot of community awareness, that's for sure.
sure.
Whether or not we see revenue,
And then I guess the next kind of measurable on that would be, accidents decreasing as a
And then the
result
driver love it.
of this.
the driver can concentrate on driving their bus and not watching cars blow by the line.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, sure, local police, they love it because they're short staffed to begin with. I know North Coventry's totally on board with this. West Vincent as well.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Gray from the committee?
Not so much for Mr. Gray, but I'm curious as to which charter schools are losing students to. Do we have a breakdown of I'm only familiar in the area of Collegium, which is relatively close by.
Renaissance Academy.
Renaissance. Yeah, there are
Renaissance.
not many in this area.
There aren't, but it is within, like Chris
Yeah,
said,
it's
within a
10
10-mile
miles, yeah.
perimeter of the district.
Collegion's next.
Yeah, so, and I think our district has a radius, or I'm sorry, a diameter of about 10 miles, so, that's like a 30-mile diameter, 15-mile radius from the point right here, so it's pretty big.
For reference, we go to Malvern Prep, Delaware Valley Friends, Villa Maria. So we'll go to Malvern, we go to Pope John Paul High School, we go to High Point Baptist, Twin Valley Bible. I mean, we're covering some
Because remember, it's
Right.
10 miles from
beyond the district boundary.
right, the out, not from
border.
where the child lives. It's from, right, closest border in the district.
Still
right, the
lower,
district boundary.
St. Pat's.
Interesting.
I would
Thank
say
you.
Malvern Paoli is about as far as we go south.
Diesel versus gasoline. Are all our buses diesel?
We have a mix. The smaller buses, the 30 passengers, the Clippers, the wheelchair buses, a lot of those are gasoline buses. The majority of the 72 passengers are diesel. So
So you pay more, but you get better mileage.
depends. It depends. I think on average, a 72 passenger diesel bus gets maybe 10 miles to the gallon. Gasoline probably in the order of 12 or 14. Yeah, not great. Not great.
But you have to think about it in terms of people per mile per gallon.
Big bus.
So if you have 72 people on a 10-mile per gallon bus, that's actually doing better than 30 people on a 12-mile per gallon bus. Because more people.
And while
So
we're
if
talking
you,
about,
I mean, you know the district, there are places we can't take a 72
Sure.
passenger bus.
Right.
It just won't fit. And we use a lot of the smaller buses, which are wheelchair equipped, and they have specialized equipment, and a lot of the smaller buses are used for special needs programs. So we'll take those into Westchester, the borough, or if we've got a homeless student that's, well beyond our 10 miles, we go to Conshohocken. So, yeah, we're transporting students well beyond our 10 miles in certain instances. So we'll take the smaller bus, or we'll use a van.
Thank you.
and then do we have an opportunity to start exploring, like electrical
Our
vehicles?
contract expires at the end of next year, so I know that's on the table to discuss with our contractor.
Right.
I
Yep.
do believe that that would be a substantial increase in daily rate for an electric school bus, but the option's there. The opportunity there is the opportunity to talk is there.
Right, to talk, and I'm also wondering if maybe there would be some interest in figuring out some sort of a phased approach. So it wouldn't just be, like, get rid of all those buses and bring in all these. But perhaps there's an opportunity there, look into, whether the carrier can take advantage of discounts or grants or whatever to help that along.
We did actually meet with our contractor about that. And there's also the infrastructure costs that go along with the electric buses. So this year, it's not a grant program, it's a rebate program. So we would have to actually change our contract mid. So what we decided to do, based on the costs that would have been for the infrastructure and even phasing in buses, we decided we have one more year on the contract, so we're going to include it in our contract negotiation. And hopefully there will still be some funds, and it would be great to get grant dollars back up and running and versus rebate. So that would help. But the bus contract is one. So we're
And Chris, I just want to point out, I know in the busing proposal that you have 101 buses going up 7 from our current
That's,
fleet. And we may end up there, but we may end up with less than that. That's the most that we would have for our later start time. We have, and I've shared this with the board before, we've realized some efficiencies with our career and technical high school. Currently, we have 4 buses that take kids directly to their homes in the afternoon. By starting later, those kids are going to come back to our campus. So we'll acquire those 4 buses back into our fleet. So Chris is running the numbers. We may need 7. We may be able to do it with less than 7.
It's very good
But
thought.
regardless, we're going to have many more efficiencies in our bus runs with those additional buses.
Also want to point out that if you're looking at a breakdown, because I was thinking as I sat there, there are about 64 of these buses that do the public school. The other 30 do the special needs and non-public schools. So
Another quick question. I seem to notice that like most buses stop at like every house. Is that like a state law? Is that a
It
district
is.
policy?
It is not, well, it is a state law because I can't require a student to walk on a hazardous road, a road that's been deemed hazard. They can't do it on Route 100 or 23 or a state highway, or 401 or anything that's been deemed hazardous by the state. It is usually a state highway. Where sight distance is reduced to 350 feet, there's a whole process for having a road determined to be hazardous, road speed, line of sight, sidewalks, and there's a lot of criteria that qualifies a roadway as hazardous, and we meet a lot of them. There are roadways where we can't have a crossover, so I'll have a bus go down, do it all the time. 23 door side this way, I'll have another bus. 20 goes down, 26 comes back. 20 stops on the eastbound lane and 26 stops on the westbound lane because we can't have crossovers. It all has to do with where in particular. There are a lot. There are a lot.
I was just looking for, if there are efficiencies and
Yeah, if I could
zoning that's.
technically, I'm not, because when I was at Westchester, we did this. But it was entirely across the board and it did not go over well. Technically, I could ask a student to walk 500 feet in a hazardous roadway if that were the closest bus stop. I don't feel comfortable doing it.
Is there a distance for a non-hazardous roadway?
Now, mile and a half.
A mile and a
So
half.
if you're, you could walk, elementary students could walk up to a mile and a half to a bus stop, so we could do that. High school students, secondary students could walk up to 2 miles to a bus stop
Wow.
if it's non-hazardous. We don't do
In the
that.
snow uphill.
Yeah, so we don't do that. State law requires us to put our lights, activate our bus lights 150 feet before a bus stop, before they actually come to a stop and make the bus stop. So no stops within 150 feet of each other. I try to keep it around 300, but I know that's not the case. I inherited a lot of those stops that kind of came with the job. So there are stops that are maybe 200 feet apart, but I would never ask a kid to walk down the ditch to get to the neighbor's house. In certain situations, if you go to Ridgely, they all walk to 4 stops. If you go into Weatherstone, they all walk to 5 stops, and they're predetermined bus stops because they're homeowners associations and everything's been predetermined, and that's where we stop and that's the route we go and that's where we are. So if you've got sidewalks, we'll walk. They'll walk in a neighborhood that's conducive to walking, yes, but the backcountry roads, not so much. If you go to a cul-de-sac, maybe everybody goes to the middle, or everybody comes out, Coventry Point, they all come out, we don't go in. There are places that we just can't go. There's some dirt roads on Mount Pleasant where you'll walk out to where it's paved. We don't go down there, so you have to walk out, but there's minor traffic, speed limits 25 or 15 maybe in some places. So we'll ask those students to walk.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, item 4.04 is being tabled to the next working session. And that brings us to agenda item 5, the 5-year capital projects fund budget and projection. Item 501 will be a presentation by Mrs. Crumbrine and Mr. Shulgin.
Thank you, Mr. Hermanis. First slide. This is just a graphical representation of what our capital fund, our capital projects fund actually funds. So obviously the largest portion is the building maintenance and improvements. So those are all the facility related capital items. We already met with Paul of San Francisco. That's the red, that is the blue, that's the 2%. Plant services and transportation vehicles, we keep our vehicles on a rotational basis. The replacement cycles, that's about 2%. And then, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Technology is 21%. My apologies. It's the other educational services and the transportation vehicles that are 2%. And other educational services, we'll talk about that in a little bit, on musical instruments or other equipment or pieces of items that are not directly related to facility. Okay. I'm sorry. It is on. You're not hearing me well enough. I'll bring it closer. How's that? Sure, no problem. Mr. Shalgren and I will tag team this, and I think he'll go over the first part. we're gonna skip over technology and go right to building maintenance and improvement services. So go ahead. Mike.
Okay. So, so the first thing you'll see is, flooring, repairs and replacements. So, we have $150,000 in for 24-25. A majority of that is, Warwick building is basically fully carpeted, both floors, and it needs a entire replacement. We're also looking at, doing, West Vincent, library. That carpet in there needs to be replaced. And then, the remainder would be like, miscellaneous flooring throughout the district, classrooms, miscellaneous offices. And then we carry every year, because every year we take a chunk of, multiple buildings and replace the flooring as it wears out. Wastewater treatment plants, we carry 25,000 a year for any major repairs for, it could be anything from, a failed pump, failed blowers, concrete work, that kind of stuff. Same thing with wells and water distribution systems. We have multiple, water source wells, and where we have wells, we treat the water on site, so we have water treatment systems. So that takes care of major repairs. Cafeteria tables and replacements, we're carrying 50,000 every other year, and 50,000 allows us to replace, all the cafeteria tables in an elementary building. So, so going by this logic, we would basically have a 10-year cycle for those, cafeteria tables. So, and, after 10 years, they start to get wore out. Torsion boards go bad. They start to become dangerous because they go up and down multiple times a day, every day for years and years and years. So, when they reach the end of life, we'll sell them at auction. Blacktop, paving, cracks, repairs. That's an annual thing. We do a district-wide assessment every spring. We come up with a quantity for, potholes, cracks, milling, repaving, and that goes through the IU. So we gather up all our totals. We give it to the IU, all the other districts in Chester County go in together, and then it goes into a large bid, and we award it to the low bidder for that work. West Vincent driveway widening. If you recall, at the February 5th working session, we talked about, as one of the projects on the 10-year study was adding that third lane up West Vincent driveway. So the work on that is relatively simple. So we are aggressively going after that for the summer. As long as we don't run into any roadblocks with any kind of permitting or storm water issues or anything like that, we're gonna try to get that done this summer so we can knock that off the list. French Creek traffic patterns, circulation, playground relocation. Again, that was part of the plan that was presented on February 5th. So we're planning to do that next summer. And we're actually gonna see if there's any grants available to help us out with the playground. There was one grant that I think was just announced last week for playgrounds, and we're gonna go after that aggressively. So if we can get the grant to pay for part of that, then that'll help with this budget as well. But where the playground is now at French Creek, that'll become parking lot, and that playground is probably 20+ years old. So we'll move the playground and give them a new playground. Use my track here. So, and then the next line is the full day kindergarten building modifications. North Coventry, we have 2 common areas that we're turning into 4 classrooms. So each common area becomes 2 classrooms. French Creek, we have to add a restroom in one of the classrooms. Same thing, West Vincent, we have to add a restroom to one of the classrooms. So that was part of the presentation earlier when that was approved, the budget number. So we're just showing that there. We are going to try to go after as much of that as we can this summer. Our architect, Schrader Group, is working on a plan right now. So as long as we can get the plan finalized and get a contractor on board, we'll try our best to get this, at least some of this done this summer. I think I'll turn it over to you for here, Jackie.
Thank you, Mr. Shelgren. Hopefully this is better with the mic. I moved it to the other side of the computer. Food service equipment, we are removing that from the capital projects fund. We do have funds in our food service fund that will be able to pay for food service items going forward, which is good. The master facilities plan for the secondary campus, what we did was we broke out the different phases in line with how David Schrader broke them out on the construction drawdown schedule that Mr. Remick presented. So we're really just trying to line all of this up and show you how it may fit in. This is a draft presentation tonight. We'll come back to you in April after we have some further discussions about our next steps moving forward. But this does fund the plan, the master facility plan over the time alignment. And I'm just making some assumptions that the actual construction would begin in the 25-26 budget, which would be the spring of 26. There's a significant amount of land development, design development, township approvals, PennDOT approvals. There's a significant amount of work that needs to be done to even get those things off the ground. Next page. I think I'm going to turn this right back over to Mr. Shelgren.
All right. Mechanical system repairs and replacements. That's part of the 10-year plan. And that's actually, if you go further back, we did a MEP feasibility study. I want to say probably 4 years ago. That information from the MEP stands for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So it's basically anything not architectural. We had MEP engineers come in and do a study, and based off that study, Schrader Group kind of took that study and ran with it, and that's what you're seeing here. I do want to say though, there is a grant that just became available that we're aggressively going after. That we can get reimbursed for 75% of a mechanical project up to $5 million reimbursement. So we are applying for that for the full reimbursement. And the application goes in May 31st, I believe. And then we'll probably know, I think towards the end of summer, if we got approved for summer, all the grant money.
Right, it's a 25% match, but we are hoping to target some of this MEP work
Yeah.
for that grant.
District Service Center roof replacement. This is a new ad for the 5-year outlook. That roof there on that building is the original roof from 1991. So it doesn't owe us anything. It's definitely an old roof. We've been patching it and repairing it as we go. We're kind of getting to the point where patching is just not working anymore. So we wanted to put that on the budget. Synthetic turf field replacement. We've been carrying that as well. That's been in the plan. So our synthetic turf fields are, the life expectancy is 10 years. I believe if we do it in 26, 27, we're actually getting 12 years out of them. So we kind of stretched it a little more than we expected, but those will need to be replaced. That is the stadium and then Wildcat South and Wildcat North. Sound system upgrades, that's for the stadium. We're working on quotes right now with some vendors, and we're going to get that sound system replaced. That's original to, I think, 2003. It's given us a lot of problems the last few years, and it's been a long ask from athletic directors, anybody else that uses the stadium and the fields out there. It's time to be replaced. District-wide concrete repairs and improvements. That's just for sidewalks, curbs. We do that in the summer, but we do an evaluation in the spring once we get out of the snow plowing weather. The curbs and take a hit from the snow plows over the winter. Sidewalks heave, sidewalks crack, that kind of stuff. So we systematically replace sections of it every year. High School Media Center, that was for last year. That's where we're at now. It's pretty much wrapped up. High school key fob, hard access elevators. That's been something requested from high school administration and security for a while now. Our elevators in this building, you need a key to operate, and we've had problems with access with the keys and not getting the keys back. What we did when we built East Coventry Elementary Schools, we went from a key system to a fob system. So you just use basically your badge. Works with the elevator. That way, when anybody, we need to disable them, we can just disable them in the system. We can keep track of who's using the elevator at what time. If there's vandalism, we can kind of backtrack and see who was in the elevator at that time. So it kind of gives us, and it's the cleaner system. We don't have to worry about getting keys back. So we're looking to retrofit our elevators here for that. Middle school pool. The lighting, is in desperate need of an upgrade, and that wasn't part of the Giza project, so, that lighting was not upgraded with all the rest of the district, so we need to update the lighting in there. And that's something we're gonna do. We're gonna purchase the lighting and our electrician will install them, so we'll save some money on that side. But the starting blocks, they need to be replaced, diving board, and the timing system as well, so that's what that is. Middle school partial roof replacement, when the middle school was renovated in between 2008 and 2010, there was a section, about a third of the middle school that, the roof was in fairly good shape, so the decision at that time was to not replace that section and to replace everything else. So now that section is starting, it's at the end of its life and it's starting to give us problems. So that's what that is. So, resurface tennis courts. So as you can see, we're not gonna push that ahead because on the 10-year plan, phase one is basically we're gonna move the tennis courts. It doesn't really make sense to put money into them if we're gonna move them anyway. And then demolish Cadmus houses. So, we closed on the other Cadmus house on Friday. So what you're seeing here, that is, the budget number for both of the houses that we own on Cadmus now, along with, the auxiliary buildings. There's two garages, a carport thing there as well. That takes care of both of those. So, and I leave the last part to you.
Okay. Thank you. Security, this is a standing item that we provide in our capital fund for anything that may come up that might be needed for Mr. Young related to anything, any security recommendations or upgrades. We are applying for other grants for access systems and cameras in some of the elementary buildings that we weren't able to hit with the last round of grants. But they told us that we were not allowed to put it in our budget because if it was in our budget, then we shouldn't be applying for a grant. So in order for us to qualify for those grants this year, we are not having them in our budget. This is the money that we received pretty much automatically last year, so I'm really not worried about it. But I just wanted to point that out to you. We are doing more in security than is reflected on here. And we're really following the plan that was originally recommended. The recipients. They're state grants, Mhm. And then the last item in the capital plan that we use our capital projects fund for are other education services. So we are at the point where we need to start replacing graduation chairs. So we're just putting a line item in there so that we can put that on a rotational basis. We had worked with Mr. Mengel on a long-term plan for musical instrument replacement, so it wouldn't come all at once. So we're working through that plan. We did the orchestra instruments and storage last year. The middle school mat hoist is another item that we need for the middle school in order to get the wrestling mats actually up off the ground. So we're looking to do that this summer. We've obtained quotes for all of these things. West Vincent Elementary School Media Center furniture replacement. We have done all of the new buildings and we also renovated the libraries at North Coventry and French Creek. So West Vincent is the last one to be done. And they also need stage risers. The high school fitness center, that was last year. So we are providing you with a 5-year plan. When you approve the budget, you're really approving 24, 25. So, but we provide you with a 5-year plan and it is subject to change. So we're always updating it and, pushing forward, or some things that may not get done this year will get done next year, etc. Do we have any questions?
All right, I have a question around, you mentioned replacing the flooring in Warwick. What's the usual life expectancy of the flooring that we put into buildings?
It depends on the flooring. In Warwick, it's carpet. It's almost 100% carpet, other than like the break room and then probably a few mechanical rooms. So out of carpet, if we got 10, 14 years out of it, I'd say that's a pretty good run.
So I guess there is a potential with our plans to build a new administrative area that we could be moving out of Warwick before that life expectancy is up. Is that correct?
Right now, we don't have that shown here, moving out of Warwick.
Okay.
That is not in the plan that is cost estimated. All we're doing right now is moving the administrators out of the district admin on the main campus in order to make room. That will come back to that later. And I will say the one thing that we're trying to do, that carpet is probably over 20 years.
Yeah,
really
it's
It's very, very old. There's spray and there are actually, I mean, in my mind, there are safety issues there. So what we're doing with that carpet is though, we'll replace it with carpet tiles.
Okay, yeah, I was
So
gonna
it's
say,
just a
could,
more
is there
modern-
something that we could
Yes.
do that would make it more like
Absolutely.
a 10, I don't know, 7 to 10 year rather than a 10 to 20 year?
And
carpet?
when we obtain quotes, Mike will make sure that we're not overpaying for carpets, but that we're not gonna get the top of the line. But carpet squares have served us well in that if there are any issues, we can pick up that square and replace it with backstop square.
Okay, middle school roof. So walking around, I would often see tiles that were wet in various, not just in one spot, but in
Mhm.
various places at the middle school. So they'll all be addressed, even though you're saying you're only replacing one part of the roof.
correct. We would address it. We would address every,
Okay.
we would address every known leak that,
Okay.
at that
Okay.
point.
Cause like the first floor, the back room across from maintenance has a bladder to collect the
Yep.
water and it rains all the time in there, every day, all day.
That,
That's all gonna be,
that north side of the building, that basically the whole
Right.
north side is the side that was not
that
replaced.
wasn't done
during the
before?
renovation.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so when they did the renovations in 2008, 2010, it was more to the center and to the south, like the north was not.
Was not
Yeah.
touched. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the part that's, I mean, there's leaks in the other areas occasionally.
Right.
Which is under warranty, so when we do get a leak, we call, they come out, they fix it, and then, eventually there's another leak, then same thing, but the other side is, I don't know how old it is, it's 20+ years old, it's way out of warranty, and, even the companies come out to repair the roof, they say this, you're at the point where it's almost impossible to repair it anymore.
That's what they were saying. And when it's under warranty, does that replace the ceiling tiles too?
Never tried that one. Yeah, but, no, usually they, we will replace the ceiling tile, they'll fix the leak, then we move on. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Of switching to electric buses and you're looking at that when the contract is up and are we looking at other ways of integrating green energy or green technology into some of these plans in the
Um,
future? Is
So,
that
yeah,
part of the
we're always looking for stuff like that. I know we looked into, right now we have solar for, the main campus. It takes about a third of our energy comes from solar on the main campus now. So we've just about maxed out roof space on the main campus for any, opportunity for solar panels, but we have looked at other buildings as well. The market at this point, it wasn't great. It wasn't even at like a break even. It almost cost us money. So we were just kind of like, waiting for the right opportunity to jump in. If there's a grant that would make it, economically feasible to do it, we would do it. And along with that, like when we do the main campus renovations, we'll be looking to put in, car chargers, and anything else we can do, along that line.
Right,
the
and as we
answers.
go through design development with the master plan, that will be one of our focuses to make sure that we're looking to do anything that we can that's cost effective.
Thanks.
The grants that you say, this grant just came up, that grant, where do you hear about them? Do you receive something or do you just constantly search?
It's actually part of what was released in the state's budget. So there are from last year. So they were that far behind in approving everything. When I say last year, I mean approval of the 23-24 state budget. So there were all of these pieces that were not signed into legislation until recently. So right now, those grant windows have finally opened. So we're applying for those. So there's security, there's 2 security grants, there's mental health, there's facilities, there's a myriad of items. So we're working through all
Quick question. So I'm looking at these budgets and looking at yours. I know we're passing 24, 25. However, looking at 26, 27, and 27, 28. And I see that's where the big part of the budget comes in if we, move forward with the capital projects and such. But I'm also seeing that's a year that we're spending a significant amount in multiple areas. That's like the time where the mechanical systems need to be replaced those years. And I was seeing it in some of the other presentations also. So besides the projects we're looking at for the different campuses, was it already budgeted? Was it part of that money that we're now putting into those projects? Like, where are we coming up with all this extra?
Okay. So when we're constantly running a 5-year plan, and we're looking at what we can pay for with cash and what we might need to borrow. We are able to fund our ongoing maintenance projects with the exception of this master facilities plan. That's outside of the norm. Even the phasing for the MEP was already included in the monies that we had set aside. So that is not part of the financing. The financing piece, and I'll show you when we get to the general fund budget, how we're stepping up debt service in order to fund the capital items. So it's kind of they're a little bit of different buckets. So when we do this, and I can actually provide you, I have a whole cash flow analysis that shows, okay, what's our projected cash at the beginning of July for 2024, and how much cash do we have when we are earning interest and when we are borrowing money and when we are using our funds? How much cash do we have left at the end of June 2029? And so my goal, our goal, Beth's goal, my goal, we're always making sure with all of our sources of revenue, can we pay for all of this? And if not, should we push something out a year? Or, we're always juggling the timeline on things without trying to risk too much. Does that make sense? Right, when the budget comes forward to you for approval, you'll be approving, it'll be right in the resolution and right in the agenda item that you're approving the 24-25 budget. But when you have a capital project fund set up like this, PDE requires us, and it's really good that they require us to do this, to maintain a rolling 5-year schedule to have a look out.
So with the line for full-day kindergarten, the adjustments, that seems really low. That's
Well,
really
that-
impressive that you could.
Which is why we're able to do this.
Yeah.
Honestly, when we walked the buildings and met with all of the principals, we realized with some minor construction and some furniture and some materials and some technology, that's what you're seeing in year 2, we're able to accommodate it. Now, we do have to do some redistricting that we talked about, so we'll be doing that. But honestly, we were very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, for a major program change
Mhm.
to have that small of a significant capital.
Capital,
change,
right.
It's really impressive.
Definitely.
Good
I'm
plan.
happy with that.
Can I ask one more quick question? This is like an overall question for you. I keep seeing the technology coming up, and I understand like it's different buckets and things like that. But why is some of the technology in our under Mr. San Francisco and some of it not? I guess is the question.
As far as technology, as far as supporting the instructional program, so we budget 1 mil of real estate taxes as part of board policy to move over to the capital projects fund to fund the technology that you see above, computers, copiers, and network upgrades that do support the whole district. Anything under, it's the way that the state requires us to code it, first of all. So then anything under building maintenance improvement services, Mike is working not only with his department, he's working with other departments to get these things done. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I was
Maybe
just
I'm not
seeing, well, I'm seeing it under so many different places. Like it was under, when we looked at, presented last, I think it was, building, somebody has like the technology for the athletic scheduling, which I thought scheduling, we
Oh.
were putting under, like, I thought Mr.
Okay.
San Francisco presented that, but this doesn't fall, even though this is a scheduling conflict and it's falling under facilities. I'm just,
Software.
it's,
Okay, So
Yeah.
software is the difference here.
Okay.
So all of our budgets, all of our cost centers, we have different software in our budgets. So for example, business services, that's where we have Serenic. That's the business and HR information system software. Mike has FMX, which is the facilities scheduling software. And it is a portion, a module in FMX that we needed to make the athletic schedule talk to. So it's an FMX piece that actually, so that when we are approving facility usage, we have all of that current information and we can see who is where. So really, there is software. We don't have a single budget for software. It is embedded all throughout. I mean, really, we can't operate any department without it. So it's embedded all throughout. That make sense? Yeah, I understand what you're saying. There are some things, the software that Mr. San Francisco has in his operations budget is really skyward and things that are related to the student systems. Chromebooks are here in the capital budget under technology. But software, we're not allowed by PDE to code it to a capital budget. Even though it lasts for more than a year, they just had a lot of different rules, that are nuanced. So software is in the operating budget under the individual cost center. That's a good question.
There was a request at the end of last year for some additional, I don't know what you call them, sockets for volleyball posts in the main gym and in the middle school gym. I didn't know if that was included in here somewhere else or.
The latest that I heard from the athletic director was, he no longer required those and they were gonna use movable bases. So, so that's the direction that we were going with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we did not do the athletic budget tonight, but one of the things in the athletic budget, and this is in particular to, I think, middle school girls volleyball, we will be proposing adding that sport next year.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Shellgren or Ms. Crumrine on this budget from the committee or from the board at large? Okay, thank you.
Thank
you. All right, we're almost there. Item number 6, the proposed general fund budget with the presentation by Mrs. Crumrine.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harmanis. I'm also going to invite Mrs. Polinsky, Beth Polinsky up. We're going to tag team this one as well. She will start off the budget presentation. And this is the general fund budget for the 24-25 school year. So right ahead.
Okay, so the first page we're looking at here is the beginning of the timeline, which we've already seen before. And good news, we are on target. We've met all of these dates. If we flip forward to page 2, we see where we are tonight, March 11th, having this Finance and Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting. The next meeting is March 18th, which is next Monday, and that is for proposed staffing allocations, followed by a working session on the 8th. And then on April 15th is when we expect to acknowledge receipt of the proposed 24-25 budget with final approval on May 20th, that school board meeting. Just a quick look at where the funds reside in the district. General fund is about 131 million. Internal service fund, which houses our healthcare costs for self-insurance is about 12 million. Capital projects, 4.8 million. Food service is 2.5 million. Student activity fund is 500,000. That is actually just a fiduciary role that we have there. We're just facilitating those funds. They are not part of the district's operational funds whatsoever. And then the debt service fund is 9.4 million, again, reflective of what you've seen tonight as far as the debt presentation and the business services presentation. Moving into revenue trends for 24-25. Under federal revenue, Title I funding has increased by 321,000, and that is because French Creek Elementary School now qualifies as a title school. As you may know, East Vincent, East Coventry, and North Coventry schools currently qualify. So French Creek will be the addition in 24-25. All other funding sources are relatively the same regarding federal. For state, there's an increase in the regular ed subsidy of approximately 1.2 million. And that is mainly because the timing of approval between when the state approves their budget and when we approve our budget, we tend to be very conservative and budget what we know we are expecting to receive. And then the state budget, as you know, often trails behind and they approve it in June or July or sometimes later, depending on the year. So this is just really basically catching up. There's also a nominal increase in the special ed subsidy of 181,000. And then moving on to local revenues, we expect real estate taxes to remain flat and earned income as well to remain flat while we're experiencing an increase in interest income. For how long, we don't know, obviously. We've been enjoying that for the last about year and a half and hoping it continues for the rest of this year. Expenditure trends, significant increase in the rate of inflation, primarily impacting our software licenses, equipment costs, fuel and supplies. We've seen evidence of that in last year's presentation and again this year's presentations. The Chester County unemployment rate is currently 2.9%. And we have been experiencing, because of that, recruiting and hiring challenges. We have less college students graduating with teaching degrees, and that is impacting our ability to hire those hard to fill teaching positions. We do expect that to continue, and I think that's kind of throughout all sectors. I know in the business area where we have that issue too, and we speak about that at our CCIU meetings. It's something that we're all experiencing. So this is something that we need to watch going forward. Significant increases in student support services such as mental health and emotional support services, student placements, and various other services. These costs are projected to increase by approximately $613,000. The technical college high school tuition costs are projected to increase by almost $300,000 as a result of the increased student enrollment. That is a popular career path, and we kind of see the trend moving away from perhaps the college degree and more into this technical area. And then finally, charter school tuition costs are projected to increase by about $205,000. We've all been following the state's proposal as to whether there will actually be a cap in the tuition costs. That remains to be seen. If that would pass, it would save us probably about $1.2 million per year in costs. Other expenditures that we're continuing to watch are salaries and benefits. They're projected to increase by 2.6 million, which is about a 3% increase. And then transportation services are also projected to increase by $972,000, partly because of the contract addendum with GNL, and then also the additional buses that will be required in order to change the start times this coming school year. So I think we had spoken about that earlier, about 7 additional buses will be needed for that. And then finally, of course, in the business services budget, we saw that there's an increase of 1.4 million. Most of that obviously is related to the debt service that we have spoken about tonight. PSERS pension costs are leveling out, which is a great thing. I'm sure we all remember the big spikes that we experienced beginning back in 2008 and the significant jumps that we've had to get us to this point now where we're at 34%. And then for the 24-25 school year, that rate will be 33.9. Going forward beyond that, we're expecting to keep rates fairly close to that 33.9 number. So we're not expecting to see any big jumps in the next 2 to 3 years. And I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Crumrine.
Thank you. Just some information that Chester County IE and the county has shared with us. So Chester County is, we talked about this a little bit earlier, our unemployment rate is 2.9%, which is low compared to the counties around us. With the exception of Lancaster, which is the first time that I've seen Lancaster jump ahead. This is just a graphical representation of the assessed property values. So this is the assessed growth in Chester County. Now, Owen J. Roberts, probably next time we meet, I'll share with you Owen J. Roberts. But this is a graph that shows you how erratic the housing market has been and how the assessment growth has gone up and down over the last few years. And the bank failure recession back in 2008 really dictated the dive earlier on. Owen J. Roberts is a little bit different because, like we always talk about, we do not have any commercial property in our district, very little. So ours is a much steadier curve. So we don't see the big swings that many of the other schools in the county see. So our motto has really been slow and steady with our growth, slow and steady with our tax rate, to keep it manageable. This is actually a good slide for ONJ this year. These are the property tax assessment appeals that occurred this year. The deadline is August 31st, so we know what our appeals are going to be. Usually we're the one that's always down at the bottom like that. We are not this year, so that's a good sign. 298,000. Thanks. This is just a graphical representation of what our revenue budget is comprised of. So we are made up of local sources, primarily funded by local sources. Federal sources, very small, state sources only 21%. And you can see that doesn't really shift much from year to year. The local revenue, the green on the left side of the screen, the chart, the graph on the right is a breakdown of what our local revenue tax sources are. So property taxes are obviously, and residential property taxes, because we have minimal commercial property, drive, 86% of the revenue that comes into the district. Act 511 taxes are taxes such as mercantile tax, very small, real estate transfer tax, some of the earned income tax, and then investment earnings and other. These are just high level differences between the budget for 23-24, the sources of revenue in 24-25. Beth really went over the fluctuations when she spoke about them earlier, so I'm not going to dwell on this. Just that right now we're embedding a two and three quarter real estate tax increase into the local sources of revenue. This is just a graphical depiction of really what parts of the budget make up our individual cost centers. So you can see obviously personnel to the far right. That's the largest piece of our budget. We were in the business of teaching students. It should be the largest piece, but we're about 68% of our total budget for salaries and benefits, and then all of the supporting services follow. And that's consistent from year. These are the responsibility cost center expenditure budgets at a glance. So you'll see in the difference column, and really I think by now, with the exception of the athletic budget, which there's a minimal change in that one, you've seen most of the large cost center budgets presented between the last working session and this evening. So we're looking at roughly about a 5% increase in expenditures. Although our tax increase does not need to be near that, because we do have a significant amount of interest income that we're realizing right now on our investments. Although it's important to note that revenue sources like earned income tax have leveled off. We were seeing significant growth in that area before, but that has definitely leveled off starting in 23-24. And then this is just looking forward. So we're going to give you a budget that's balanced in 24-25, but I always want to make sure you know what our 3-year budget projections are for the general fund budget. And so this is just a quick snapshot of what it looks like. We have in our fund balance reservations included tax impact mitigation dollars from when we were operating under COVID and we were receiving grant money, and we did save some funds. So on our financial statements last year, we designated those funds as tax impact mitigation. So we're balancing our outlying budgets right now for 26-27 and 27-28, utilizing some of those funds. And we're trying to project a level tax increase of 2.25. So that's what it looks like right now. And you can see right now the tax increase is well below the Act 1 index. So I don't know if you've been reading the papers, but many of our neighbors are having 5%, 4% tax increases. The rate of inflation is real, and our Act 1 index, that's our taxing limit, is at 5.3%. We do not need to go to 5.3% to balance our budget. And then the outlying years, you see that the Act 1 index is going down, 4%, 25, 26, 3.6, followed by 3.2. So accordingly, our tax increase is also going down in the outlying years. But this is a projection and things can change, but that's where we are today. And then the last slide is just a history of our tax increases. What the average has been around 2.2, 2 2.75 for this year, and then the Aquiline index is at 5.3. That's an all-time high index that I've seen. I'm happy to answer any questions. So this is the proposed budget, and we'll be back. We're always tweaking it. We'll be back April 8th during the working session, not long presentations, just to give you an update about where we are with all of the budgets. So if you have any questions or concerns
Just
or
for the
comments.
benefit of,
Mhm.
I think explaining what the Act One index means, that the district could literally plan just up against that without having to go to referendum.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Correct.
you
Or
can
use
see how far
exceptions.
below that
Mhm.
are we have that good plan.
Thank you. Question?
Any other questions from the committee, from the board at large? Okay, thank you very much for your time this evening. The meeting is adjourned.